Yo guys, what's going on? I'm Tim Kelly along with Justin Godsey. This is the 30 Clubs 30 Preview Special presented by the Real Sports Talk and the Nation Sports Blog. Today we are on to the Colorado Rockies, who were one of the worst teams in the MLB last year with a 64-98 record, ultimately dismissed their manager Jim Tracy, and Walt Weiss, the former MLB shortstop with the Atlanta Braves, Oakland A's, and a few other teams. He will be taking over as the manager. This is his first experience as a big league manager, so it should be interesting to see how things go for this Colorado Rockies team. So let's take a look at what the Rockies did this offseason.
Now, when you look at this offseason, the Colorado Rockies did not make a splash at all. It was really surprising because when you looked at it, I think this team just needed to go out in free agency and just improve in one area, and that's their pitching rotation, which when you look at it, does not have a lot of depth. But when you go to the other signings that they had, and they made some minor splashes, which will more than likely help out their farm system at AAA and trying to get these guys up to the major league level at some point in the season. They were able to get back Manny Corpus, who last year went with the Chicago Cubs. They were able to get Chris Volstad, who's been on a major decline in recent years. They got catcher Yorvi Torrialba, who I see has a really strong chance of making this roster, possibly as a bench hitter. Because when you look at it, I don't think the Rockies are going to be too set on Willen Rosario as of right now. I think Yorvi Torrialba brings some solid pop to the bench, and that will be something that will be good for this team going into the later months, into like August and July. They also got Corey Dickerson. I think he actually went over to the Yankees last year, and he's going to be providing some depth over at the AAA level until they can find some room for him on their major league level.
And the only big decline that I can really think of is Jason Giambi leaving this team as a bench player. He heads off to Cleveland. Jason Giambi actually interviewed for the manager spot, veteran player, been in the MLB since the late 90s, early 2000s, so he interviewed for the spot, ultimately was one of the serious candidates, but Walt Weiss was chosen to be the next manager of the Colorado Rockies. For this Rockies team, it begins behind the plate with Willen Rosario, one of the brightest young catchers right now. Rosario last year led all MLB catchers with 28 home runs, hit .270, drove in 71 RBIs, and that was all in 117 games. That was not a full season. You add probably 200 to 250 more at bats to what Rosario's going to be seeing this year, and all of a sudden, this is a guy who has big league type power. He had 21 home runs at the AA level a couple years ago, so I think Rosario has a bright future for this Rockies team.
I like to correct myself. I don't know why I said this team is not too set on Willen Rosario. I correct myself there. But, Willen Rosario, looking at his stats last year, this is a guy who's going to get you a lot of home runs because he's one of those guys that can go above and beyond, just like a solid catcher home run rate at this current year and time is at best 20 home runs. But Willen Rosario went above and beyond that. 28 home runs last year, batted .270. Really solid season for him. The future is bright for him in Colorado.
And then they have the veteran backup Ramon Hernandez. Hernandez last year in his first season with the Rockies played 52 total games, hit .217, 5 home runs, 28 RBIs. You mentioned that they brought back Yorvi Torrialba. Torrialba, he's never been a great fielding catcher, but he provides some pop, and if they decide to keep 3 catchers, then they could use Torrialba just as a pinch hitter rather than just as the backup catcher, and that may be a role that Torrialba is more valuable for. Todd Helton is at first base, as always. He's been there since 1998 full-time. This has been one of the better first basemen over the last 10 to 15 years. Last year, he fell down to 69 total games, hit .238, 7 home runs, 37 RBIs. This is a guy who has always prided himself on having a high average. He's always been a guy who you can count on for an average above 300. He has a career average of 320. And to see him slip to .238 last year, even though it was in under 70 games, ultimately I think that it might be coming to a close for Todd Helton.
I agree with you 100%, Tim. When you look at his offseason, he ran into a driving while intoxicated charge, and he said it himself, it was a stupid part on his role. DWI charge, but you know what? I don't think that's going to become a factor. But his overall playing ability has declined a little bit, and you know what? We're just seeing the final years of Todd Helton of being a Colorado Rocky. If this does not work out with if Wise does not really work out with the Colorado Rockies, you know, you could possibly think of a Todd Helton somewhere down the line for our Colorado Rockies becoming a manager, because this guy knows the team top to bottom. And you know what? For right now, with his playing career, you know, he's going to get you a nice solid average every year, and you know that's something that this Colorado Rockies team needs.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question if he's able to play a full year to expect the average to go up. He's still a pretty solid fielder. I think another year or two, and likely that will be the end of Todd Helton's career. He spent his entire career with Colorado, which is very rare at this point. So certainly big props to him, but it seems like it's coming to a close. Backing him up at first base, you have Michael Kadire as an option. Michael Kadire plays pretty much every position in the outfield and has the ability to play first, and even a little third, I believe, so he's very valuable to this team, no doubt about it. At second base, Josh Routledge will be the starter. Routledge last year, even though he's mostly a shortstop, in 73 games hit .274, 8 home runs, 39 RBIs. He's young, he's talented, and the Rockies have Troy Tulowitzki over at shortstop. Whether they decide long-term to hold on to Tulo, who they do have locked up for a while, if they decide to hold on to him, then they have a great second baseman in Routledge. If they decide that they can get a better return than what it would be worth to keep Tulowitzki, then you can ultimately look at Routledge as a shortstop. But either way, he should have a solid career with the Colorado Rockies.
Oh, the future is bright for this guy. I've been watching this guy also. I'm a huge prospects type of guy. You know, Josh Routledge has been one of those guys I've been watching, because this guy can play both shortstop, can play third base. Not too solid over at first, but you know what? The Colorado Rockies are going to use him as a second baseman here. It's going to be a great move. He has not played a single game at the AAA level. He made a huge jump from AA Tulsa Drillers all the way up to the main roster. Josh Routledge in 73 games last year. He's had a split season with Tulsa and also with the Colorado Rockies. But in the 73 games that he saw, he had a phenomenal, you know, appearance during the games. 8 home runs, 37 RBIs, and batted .274. I think this is a guy who has the power to reach about 12 to 13 home runs a year. I think that's going to be really solid. I think with his batting average, he has the ability to reach, you know, maybe a 301, maybe 303, but beyond that, I think that's going to be, you know, that's going to have to be like a tremendous breakout season for him. But Josh Routledge does has a very solid future for the Colorado Rockies.
And backing him up at second base is DJ LeMahieu. Mahieu last year at the AAA level stole 13 bags, hit .314. Then in 81 games, that is half the season, at the MLB level, hit .297 with 2 home runs and 22 RBIs. So overall, at the MLB level, he showed some promise. You'd like to see him become more of a weapon at the MLB level on the base paths, the way that he was at AAA, because he was only 1 of 3 in stolen bases. But he's going to be a good contact hitter. I don't expect a ton of power out of him, and he can drive the ball a little bit, get you some RBIs. More than that, he's a solid backup. Troy Tulowitzki will be your starter over at shortstop. Tulo, when he's healthy, probably the best shortstop in the game. If not, he's right there, because 2011 we saw a full season, or not necessarily a full season because he only played 143 games, but close to a full season, and he hit .302 with 30 home runs, 105 RBIs, stole 10 bases. That's an all-around tremendous performance, and he's a solid shortstop. Last year, once again, though, was struck with injuries like he has been for a majority of his career. Not only last year, but 2008, 2010, he has just never been able to stay healthy coming off of good seasons. Last year hit .287, 8 home runs, 27 RBIs, was on his way to another solid injury, or another solid season, I should say, and just really the injuries killed him.
Yeah, Troy Tulowitzki last year, you know, he's been plagued with injuries all of last year. One injury really came to mind was when, I think it was Pablo Sandoval, the Rockies were playing the Giants last year, and Pablo Sandoval hit a foul ball into, you know, the dugout for the Colorado Rockies, striking Tulo in the knee, and that really sidelined the rest of his season. And that was a tremendous loss for the Colorado Rockies, because at the time, Cargill wasn't playing at 100%, Dexter Fowler was on a decline, and Kadire was not always there. But, you know, Troy Tulowitzki, when this guy is 100% healthy and he's playing baseball, this guy is a treat to watch. This is a guy who needs to get back, needs to be 100% healthy this year. If this team is really going to be competing this year in this National League West, because they need Carlos Gonzalez, but you know what? Tulowitzki, the face of the franchise, needs to be healthy and lead the charge for this team.
And we saw him go down last year. When he went down, they certainly had a pretty solid backup in Routledge, who obviously that earned him the starting second base spot going into spring training. So Routledge did a nice job stepping in. Ultimately, though, he is not going to provide the same amount of pop, and he's just not as good as Troy Tulowitzki. Troy Tulowitzki is the face of this franchise, and he needs to be able to stay healthy if this team is to have good success in 2013. Over at third base, Chris Nelson will get the nod. Nelson last year in 111 games hit .301 with 9 home runs and 53 RBIs. I think that this is a Rockies team who their pitching was just so bad last year, but there were some bright sides, guys like Routledge, LeMahieu. There were some guys that we saw come up and actually provide pretty good seasons, even though a lot of them only played half seasons, that leave you feeling optimistic. And while Chris Nelson isn't necessarily a rookie, he's 27 years old, he came up and had a pretty solid season for the Rockies last year. After a season in 2011 where he only hit .250, last year he had an even better year where he's able to up that average by 50-plus points.
I think Chris Nelson is one of the most underrated third basemen in Major League Baseball. This guy can give you a nice solid average, batted .301 last year. You know, he's not going to give you a lot of home runs, but when you look at this guy in somewhat clutch situations, this guy can really bring that back. This is a guy you don't want to face when you have runners on second and runners on third, because you know what? This guy can't get on base, and this guy can produce really well in clutch situations. So, you know, Chris Matthew, he also does play great defensive baseball. And you know what? I think this is, if you're looking at this team, wait for Chris Nelson to get up and bat, because you know what? You're going to be seeing something special out of Chris Nelson. Maybe this year he could possibly reach up and get a higher home run ratio. Maybe he has the ability to reach up to 15 home runs. He just needs to, you know, get more power into his bat.
Now, backing him up over at first base is Jordan Paccio, who actually got a lot of the work at third last year. In 132 games, hit .309, 5 home runs, 54 RBIs, stole 7 games. So they have 2 solid options over at third base. In left field, though, no questions about who's starting out there. Carlos Gonzalez is starting in left field. Last year comes back with just another tremendous overall season. Hits .303, 22 home runs, 85 RBIs, stole 20 out of 25 bases that he attempted. He's probably never going to do what he did in 2010 again, where he hit .336, 34 home runs, stole almost 30 bases. The league somewhat adjusted to him, but he has shown that he still is while he's not a superstar like we thought he might be in 2010, he's a premier outfielder and one of the most dangerous hitters and overall players in the game right now.
Cargo, I love this guy. This guy is a great outfielder. When you look at him, this is also another player that you want to look out for this year, because every year is a treat watching Carlos Gonzalez. You know, last year, you know, the 22 home runs, 85 RBIs. I think this guy has what it takes, you know, to get back higher in the RBI averages. We need to see the Carlos Gonzalez that we saw in 2010. That year, 34 home runs, 17 RBIs. Could he be close to that? Yes, but you know what? Carlos Gonzalez, he also needs to be, he is a little bit injury prone, but you know what? I don't think that's really going to hold this team down. I think Carlos Gonzalez, heading into this upcoming season, is going to have a phenomenal year.
Backing him up in left field, and really their fourth outfielder, a guy who will get looks in center field as well, is former top prospect Eric Young Jr. We all remember his dad playing, and I believe it was St. Louis or Texas, one of the two. We remember him playing there. He was an analyst on ESPN for a while. Eric Young Jr., 98 games in 2012, hit .316, 4 home runs, 15 RBIs, stole 14 bases. So he's finally showing some of the promise that he once had when he came up with this team, and Walt Weiss is actually excited about him. He thinks that he has the ability to play all 3 outfield positions, and he thinks that this is a very good option he has to utilize off of his bench.
I like Eric Young Jr. a lot because this is a guy who's dangerous on the base path and plays great defensive baseball. You're not going to see him go out there and hit a lot of home runs. I think when you look at it, what you saw last year, I think he's good enough to get about at least 8 to 9 home runs a year, because when you looked at him throughout his college at Chandler Gilbert, Arizona, I saw him play, I think, all but like 2 or 3 games because my friend goes there, and I was able to watch Eric Young Jr., but overall, Eric Young Jr. is a really phenomenal outfielder. Like I said, plays great defensive baseball, gets on base a lot. It can get you a nice solid average once he's playing every day. But, you know, with this outfield, with the way that it is, you got Kadire in right, you got Dexter Fowler in center field. You know, he's not going to get a lot of playing time. That's understandable. But when he's off the bench, he's more than likely going to come in, you know, as a pinch runner, and he can steal bases.
Yeah, he certainly can. He's going to be valuable to this team. If they ultimately were to decide to move Michael Kadire, which is a possibility, even though we just signed a deal before last season, or even if they decided that Todd Helton, this is going to be his last year, and he wants to go to a contender, then they would shift Kadire into first base, and then ultimately maybe use Eric Young Jr. in right field. So they have some options out in this outfield. In center field, Dexter Fowler will be starting. This is a guy who's still only 26, 27 years old. Last offseason, there were a lot of rumors of Dexter Fowler getting traded, and ultimately it didn't happen. We ended up seeing more guys like Denard Span, guys like Ben Revere ended up getting traded. Dexter Fowler actually ended up signing a 2-year, $11 million deal, just over $11 million, at about $11.6 million deal with the Rockies. And in 143 games last year, hit 313 home runs, 53 RBIs, stole 12 bases. He's a very good value to this team. And he's not a great player, but he's just a pretty solid player. And he's pretty solid out in the field. I like Dexter Fowler a lot, and I think he's one of the more underrated outfielders. Had a breakout season last year.
Now, I said this before, I'm going to say it again. Dexter Fowler is Cameron Maybin Jr., because, you know, when you guys look at it, they both play similar baseball, kind of like how I compared Escobar, the shortstop for the Royals, Alcides Escobar, to Alexi Ramirez of the White Sox. I mean, I can see great comparisons with Cameron Maybin and Dexter Fowler together. Dexter Fowler, dangerous on the base path. He can get you. He's not a frequent stealer, but you know, with the speed that he has, and you look at how he plays defensive baseball, it's phenomenal. And he can rob players of home runs, and that's something that they really do need. 11 home runs a year is going to be solid for Dexter Fowler, but you know, his average is right where it needs to be, about 300.
In right field, then, you have Michael Kadire, spent his entire career prior to last year with the Minnesota Twins, and at 101 games in his first season with the Rockies after signing a 3-year deal. Michael Kadire hit .260 with 16 home runs and 58 RBIs, stole 8 bases. He's a value mostly because of his ability to play numerous different positions. He's a good player, not a great player, a lot similar to Josh Willingham, who is now in the Minnesota Twins, except he won't strike out quite as much. I like Michael Kadire, but I think he is someone that, if the right trade comes along, we could ultimately see moved at the deadline.
I think overall, I think Michael Kadire has got to be a keeper for this team right now, because when you look at it, this team needs what they can right now if they're really going to compete this year. And I think Michael Kadire, when you look at his days with the Twins, this guy had a solid power bat. But when you looked at last year with the Colorado Rockies, I think he went on a major decline. This is a guy who we saw, 32 home runs, and then we had a down year with Minnesota with 14. Then he got his home run power back up to 20 home runs, and then he got back to a minimum amount of home runs. He needs to get back to the days where we saw him in 2009, where he got 34 home runs. 32 home runs, I apologize. 32 home runs. They just need that type of Michael Kadire back with this team.
I'd be very surprised if they were actually able to get that, though. If they do, then you can bank on him getting traded, because that will be where he's at his best value. Looking over to the rotation now, which is really the Achilles heel of this team, Julius Chassin will be their ace. Last year, Chassin missed the entire, he pitched 14 games, went 3-5 with a 4.43 ERA. Really struggled coming off of an 11-14 season with a 3.62 ERA, and the season prior to that having a 3.28 ERA. He needs to get a lot closer to the 3.28 that led us all to believe he was going to be a nasty pitcher for years to come. Signed a 2-year, $6.5 million deal in the offseason with the Rockies, and he needs to figure things out this season.
It was a big decision right now for Chassin, because when you looked at Chassin's situation, it's the same thing as Jorge De La Rosa, who's their number 2 pitcher, on who is going to be the opening day starter. But you can't go wrong with going with Julius Chassin. This guy has a nasty fastball, and it can reach up, to triple digits. And they just need him to be healthy this year. And they also just need that run support. And you know what? If they have all that this year, Julius Chassin could be a top pitcher in baseball.
Now, Jorge De La Rosa, who Justin just alluded to, he missed pretty much the entire season last year coming off of Tommy John surgery. Went 0-2 with a 9.28 ERA in the 3 appearances that he made. That really doesn't mean a ton. Prior to that, in 2011, went 6-2 with a 3.51 ERA. I think that this is a middle-of-the-rotation type of guy who you can count on an ERA around 4 from. I think he's overpaid, and ultimately a guy that we could see dealt this year because he is a bit overpaid and a bit expensive to a team that doesn't have great success. But to a contender, he could be a solid number 3 or 4 starter.
I see Jorge De La Rosa being on a contender team as a number 4 guy. This guy has just been on a major decline. He's been injury plagued the past couple of seasons, and he needs to be 100% healthy. This is a guy, when you remember back in 2000, I think it was like in 2007 or 2008, when I think he was traded from the Kansas City Royals over here. The Rockies really valued him as their ace for that team, in the 2008 and 2009. In 2009, he just really exploded with a 16-9 record. His ERA wasn't too hot, but you know what? They need that type of season out of Jorge De La Rosa. I think it's going to be make it or break it year for De La Rosa, because like you said, Tim, he's kind of expensive, and you know what? I think with the major decline that he's been having this past couple of seasons, this has got to be the make it or break it year for Jorge De La Rosa.
Yeah, it really does need to be that. Now, Jeff Francis, who they brought back last year after a couple years in Kansas City, some injury problems. 1 year in 2007, he went 17-9. That year, though, he had a 4.22 ERA. So he went 17-9, had 200 innings, but he had a 4.22 ERA. So he's never really a great pitcher. And then it all went downhill. Had 2 straight seasons over a 5 ERA. Came back last year with a 5.58 ERA. Really, just he's terrible. I don't understand why the Rockies continue to bring him back. But the fact that he is their number 3 starter, to me, that pretty much says it all about this Rockies team, and the fact that this is a rotation that really is not all that much improved from last season's disaster.
Yeah, Jeff Francis, I don't know why the Colorado Rockies are even putting this guy in their pitching rotation. He has not been the Jeff Francis that we saw, with his early days of the Rockies, where he was actually pretty decent. Now, major disappointing with his time with the Kansas City Royals, 6-16. It's just time for that guy to go in Kansas City. So he returned to the Colorado Rockies on a minor league deal. He somehow got his way back up to the roster last year. But when you look at the offseason, Jeff Francis said he can be a top pitcher for the Colorado Rockies. He's declined to play for Team Canada this year because he is a Canadian, lives up in British Columbia, and he said he's more focused on, going into spring training and really just advancing on his fastball, advancing on his pitching mechanics. I think that's the biggest thing that he really needs to concentrate on right now. I think the World Baseball Classic, it's good for top players, but for Jeff Francis and Team Canada, I obviously don't even think if he was to play for Team Canada, he will leave a big mark for Team Canada.
Yeah, I don't think he would either, and I don't think he's left a big mark for the Colorado Rockies. He's really been a guy who once he looked like he could be a 3 or 4 starter. Now he just is he's a 3 or 4 starter, but only pretty much by default. Number 4 starter for the Rockies is going to be Juan Nicasio. Nicasio last year went 2-3 with a 5.28 ERA in 58 innings. Prior to that, at the AA level, he had gone 5-1 with a 2.22 ERA. In the season before in the MLB, he had a 4.14 ERA. So he's shown some promise in the minors, never really even pitched at the AAA level, but out of necessity, they've had him at the MLB level the last 2 years, and he really just has not had very good success.
I think it's a gamble right here for them because I'm going to bring up a potential starter in their pitching rotation. From the bullpen, Rex Brothers can really fit in the pitching rotation as well. But if you're going with Juan Nicasio or Juan Nicasio, you can really depend on him to be, an inning eater, and that's what they really need out of, their whole pitching rotation. They didn't go into this off season and grab pitching, but you know what, they're using what they got in the minor leagues. Juan Nicasio, Juan Nicasio. He's going to have to be the guy for right now. I think he was also got hit in the head with the ball also, kind of like how Brendan McCarthy was. And was that the guy, Tim?
Yeah, I believe he was, yeah.
Yeah, but he is a great pitcher overall, and he on a basic team, I think he'll be on a contending team. He'll be that guy to start the season down in the minors at this current point in time.
Yeah, I agree with that. At their number 5 spot, they still have a guy who has a lot of potential. That's Drew Pomeranz, the former top prospect in the Cleveland Indians system who got dealt for Ubaldo Jimenez. He was one of the biggest pieces in that trade. In 2011, he came up with this team, really struggled, went 2-1 with a 5.40 ERA, and then in 2012, in 22 starts, went 2-9 with a 4.93 ERA. But I continue to look back at 2011, where his total numbers between Double-A of both the Colorado Rockies and the Cleveland Indians, his total numbers were 4-3 with a 1.78 ERA, and then last year in Double-A and Triple-A, he was 4-4 with a 2.31 ERA. So the potential is still there with Drew Pomeranz. I know the record looks horrendous last year. The ERA does not look very good, but I expect a big turnaround from Pomeranz this year. I'm not exactly sure what numbers, but I certainly expect to see a guy that has a lot more to him this year.
Now, you're going to go into this season looking for your number 5 star, because that's pretty much what spring training does. It really rounds up your pitching rotation at number 4 and number 5. That's why you get all these guys down in your minor league system, bring them up to spring training. And you know what? Drew Pomeranz is going to be coming into spring training at Salt River Field, the brand new spring training stadium, competing for a starting job. Because there's 3 guys also on this team that are also going to be contending for starting jobs. That's also going to be Tyler Chatwood and Christian Fiedrich. Because if you look at last year, Tyler Chatwood, I saw him play when he was a member of the Angels. He ended up getting traded to the Colorado Rockies. I don't know who it was for, but he wasn't a promise to be there for the Los Angeles Angels in his debut year in 2011, went 6-11 with 4.75 ERA, and he got traded midway through the season to the Colorado Rockies, where it just went downhill for him even there. But you know what? The Rockies still have a lot of confidence in Tyler Chatwood for him to go into spring training and really compete for that final job. For Christian Fiedrich, he's been down at AAA and Double-A. He did not go to A-ball when he was drafted. But he has great tools. His time up in the major leagues last year, he appeared in 16 games, went 5-8 with a 6.17 ERA. That really needs to bring down. But you know what? I think it's in the long run, and when it's coming down to the final week of spring training, you can really contend between Christian Fiedrich and Drew Pomeranz. I think Tyler Chatwood will either start the season down at the AAA level for the Rockies, or possibly having a bullpen role.
Now, into their bullpen, a guy that you mentioned first was Rex Brothers. Rex Brothers last year in 75 appearances for this team. He had a very good season, I think. An 8-2 total record. 3.86 ERA is somewhat high, and I think that he needs to bring that down this year. But the thing that happened last year was he struggled early on in the season and found himself midway through the season, and that's what I expect to see happen more this year. 2 years ago, at a 2.88 ERA in 48 games. Justin, I know that Rex Brothers is one of your favorite guys, so what do you expect out of him this year?
Rex Brothers, this is my favorite all-time greatest player right now on this Colorado Rockies team, and also in minor league baseball, because you know what, this guy is phenomenal. I saw this guy play back in college when he played at Lipscomb in Tennessee. This guy has amazing tools. Last year he went 8-2 with a 3.86 ERA in 67 and a half innings. This guy has what it takes to bring it to play his way into the pitching rotation. It could be sometime throughout this heading into this year that we could see Rex Brothers getting a potential start. This guy can, get called on and can really get you out of innings. This is a future of the baseball right here in Rex Brothers. So one of these guys, this is a guy right now for the future of baseball.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I know you're a big fan of Rex Brothers, so we'll leave it with that with him. The final two guys in their bullpen, Matt Belisle will be the setup man, went 3-8 with a 3.71 ERA. This is actually a former starter turned reliever for the Cincinnati Reds. Belisle pitched fairly solid out of this team's bullpen, but again, they don't have a strong starting rotation, so they're going to need to get more holds out of him this year to get the ball to Rafael Betancourt, their closer. Betancourt last year 1-4, 2.81 ERA, 31 saves, but blew 7 attempts. He's going to need to do a better job. I mean, Justin, just overall, this team's pitching was really, really, really bad last year.
Absolutely. It also has to go with the decline in the hitting and the injuries that went through. I mean, there was no run support. You were depending on, just these average guys to get runs on the board. When Tulo was out last year, you were really just depending on the power hitting with, Chris Nelson, who was your power hitter at the time. Todd Helton, he's an average hitter. He's not going to wow you with a lot of home runs. Kadire was off a little bit. And you also had Dexter Fowler. I mean, when the big power hitters, like, Tulo and Cargo, when those guys were injured last year somewhat, they had to go with these average guys. They really did not, connect the dots this offseason and really just go out there and try to build and get more power to this lineup. And it was a really down offseason for this Colorado Rockies team. If this team is really going to contend this year, you need 100%. We need to have the 100% Troy Tulowitzki at 100% health. You need Michael Kadire to come out swinging like he did a couple of years ago, where he hit like 33 home runs with the Minnesota Twins. And he needs Todd Helton to, possibly coming down in his final year or two to really come out and have a huge season if this team is really going to be a contender.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. That is what they need. I'm not sure they're going to get it. I think Troy Tulowitzki's a great player, but he's just too injury prone. I think Todd Helton's done. And quite honestly, I think that this team is going to have another rough year. It's tough to watch. They're a team that a few years ago looked very bright, and they just don't look like that right now. I see about 68, 69 wins for this team.
I say 65 to 64 wins. I mean, I just don't see this whole team is officially here yet. I mean, we all just got to depend. This team really just has to depend on, Troy Tulowitzki and Carlos Gonzalez at this point.
Yeah, they do. So that is our Colorado Rockies 2013 season preview. Let us know what you think. We've been wrong on teams before. We killed the Oakland A's last year, and then they made the playoffs, and we heard about that. So let us know what you think. I'm Tim Kelly for Justin Gotze. This is the Real Sports Talk and Nation Sports Blog presents the 30 Clubs, 30 Previews MLB special. We'll see you guys later.